Okay, welcome to episode 104 of the Sumer Sports Show. I'm Eric Eager. I'm joined by Thomas Dimitrov, who's not actually that far away from me physically right now, but in his office. We're on to week three. Week three is going to be exciting. I can't wait to preview some of these games. Thomas, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm sitting here. I'm having such a great day. You and I have been talking all day with Sean Clement, and we have a great visitor here. My great friend Jack Easterby dropped by Atlanta in the Sumer South North. What are we calling it? And we always talk deep and many, many layers of depth and insight. So I love when Jack's here. I'd love to have Jack on again. We had him, what was it, about half a year ago? Jack was joining us. We were talking all good things leadership. But believe me, when we get talking here, like when we're in our office here, there's always great new ideas coming our way. So excited about it. And we have some good games, right, to talk about today. I don't know are we ready for Thursday already, by the way?
Yeah. Jack was the first ever guest of the Sumer Sports Show, which is awesome, from your house in Buckhead. And yeah, it's been just really fun. It's such an interesting experience when you work on these problems and you kind of, you're all speaking the same language. Me and Sean, we're kind of throwing these ideas together. And there's a funny thing about research, Thomas, which is that eventually you kind of get bored with your own ideas after a while because you're working on them so long. And it's so invigorating at times to give them to somebody else and see whether or not they like them or they think they're good, and sometimes that's scary because they might not think that they're that innovative. But in the case that you're truly onto something, which I think we are, it really is a real fun experience. So it's been great. Am I ready for Thursday Night Football? I don't know. It was really funny, Thomas. They were on Good Morning Football today. They were playing the replay of the 1990 NFC Championship game where the 49ers, who you remember did not lose a road game from 1989 and 1990, lost to Jeff Hostetler, Bill Belichick, your old boss, Bill Parcells, and the Giants. That was, of course, and the Giants went on the road, as one of our founders, Jack Jones, will remember, in 2011 en route to the Super Bowl and winning the conference title game there. So a lot of history that is going to be remembered Thursday night. Unfortunately, this year, I think that we're going to have to look to history for a compelling game, because right now the Giants, Saquon Barkley is out with an ankle injury. The Giants are about 10-point underdogs on the market, Thomas. And so I'm not exactly sure if this game is going to be as competitive as it could be, but we did see a real game effort by Daniel Jones in a situation where they're trailing by 20 and then eventually 21 to the Arizona Cardinals, where they came back and won. He was very efficient throwing to guys like Darren Waller, Jalen Hyatt, and so forth. There was some life in that Giants team after they had been outscored 60-0 in the first 6 quarters of their season.
It was a tough start. Where do you think they are? Let's talk about this for a minute, because we had our comparatives stat boards up. What are we calling them from PFF, or from, excuse me, did I say that? Not PFF. From our Sumer website. What are we calling those sort of juxtapositioning stat boards?
Yeah, so we have these like very compelling sort of post game. I'm going to actually pull one up from our Twitter account at Sumer Sports for folks who are interested. We've got a bunch of great content, not only on the website. Actually, let me bring up actually the website for today, because we have a very cool article that has come out, and this stemmed from, now Thomas, you were not making fun of, but you were goofing about the fact that I went to the Vikes-Eagles game, but during that game I was a couple seltzers deep, and the Vikings kicked an extra point down 13 when they should have probably gone for 2. This is the latest article on our website. But we also have some really compelling, post game looks at some of these games at Sumer Sports. Let me pull up the one from that Cardinals versus Giants game here just a week ago. I'm gonna find this one. I'm gonna look it up here and post it on the screen. This is our sort of general. This is our general sort of game review here. We were talking about this off air, but the Giants on offense against this Cardinals defense was very efficient here. You know, a 90th percentile success rate of 53.7%. EPA per rush in the 88th percentile. A lot of that is Daniel Jones with his legs, as well as Saquon Barkley. I think, you know, the one concerning part, if you're a New York fan going into this game against the San Francisco 49ers, is how efficient Arizona was against you. 83rd percentile EPA per play. A lot of that was big plays, as you can see with the success rate for the Cardinals being sort of more in the middle of the pack. When you look at this, Thomas, what do you see? I see a situation where the Giants really found themselves offensively, but in many ways they had to because they struggled so much defensively.
Yeah, I would love for you to continue to go on here, because I think as we're talking about, can we shift over to the 49ers as well?
Yeah, let me go ahead and find that here on our Twitter, because the San Francisco 49ers were also impressive in their effort. I'm going to pull that up here real quick as well. Here we go. This is the San Francisco 49ers LA Rams version of it. Notice here, a lot of people were lauding Matthew Stafford for how good he was in the first 2 weeks, but actually the 49ers got enough turnovers, enough sacks and things like that to really clamp down on the LA Rams. One thing to notice here, Thomas, only a 4% explosive play rate for the LA Rams, and we define explosive play rate as being a 90th percentile EPA play. The Giants were able to come back against the Cardinals because they were able to get chunk plays. This San Francisco 49ers team is not a team that is going to give up that many chunk plays. And so if you're a Giants backer, let's say you want to bet this game, or maybe you have, you know, some Giants in fantasy football, I don't know if it's going to be the best night for you, given how good San Francisco's defense is. And then when you look at the offense, that's a lot of green there. EPA per play, 74th percentile. And in fact, I think the Niners maybe got a little unlucky in this game. Just a 20% late down success rate, which is only the 3rd percentile. The Niners were very efficient on early downs in this game, not as efficient on late downs. If that even reverts back to the median, this could be a really tough game for the Giants defense.
So one of the things I do want to talk about as well on this, since we are here, because this is fascinating for me, where we're going with the data and the metrics, right? We were talking a little bit earlier with Jack Easterby, and we were talking about the idea of, you know, years ago, you could go into an advance with your pro group. Like as a general manager, we would go in and look at our pro scouting group to, you know, advance to the coaches. And you could get by with some very remedial or basic statistics, right? In today's world, I don't believe you can do that. Can we talk a little bit about this and the evolution of this? I think this is important if we have, you know, football people that are listening, and not just the data department, right? Because my goal here is to continue to edify football people, professionals, along with the data people, of course. This, I think, is a really important part of our company, right? So that when GMs or up and coming rising, you know, rising stars within the NFL are coming, how are they able to utilize the way that we are approaching this metric charting here, right? Because back in the day they weren't, and there's still a lot of people that don't know about this. They're still growing and they're still learning, right? Can we just talk about this for a minute? I know this is a little off topic from the games, and I know you're getting excited for me, but I think this is a really important topic. I don't want the football people to go on here and go, oh my gosh, I'm not really sure what the EPA, early down EPA/play is. I'm going to go somewhere else and find another stat or another really insightful piece of information.
Yeah, so EPA is just this. I mean, so this is the work of a lot of really good analysts, where you look at, you know, it was back to maybe Aaron Schatz of Football Outsiders that looked at splitting up early down and late down, right? Where early down is more predictive week to week and year to year, and late down is more noisy. Like, all that's research that people have done in the space to try to contextualize what you can expect one week versus what you can use to explain the previous week. And then expected points added and success rate are just two different ways to get away from, yards per play, which can be fluky, right? So I always think about EPA as being like the Mike Allstott, Warwick Dunn breakup, where, Warwick Dunn always averaged more yards per play, but he never ran the short yardage plays. So when Mike Allstott runs for 2 yards on 3rd down and 1, that's a positive play, but it's still only 2 yards. And if a guy averages 2 yards a carry, that's not going to be necessarily as looked at as well, but he's getting his job done. So what expected points added and success rate do is contextualize the yards that are gained on the field en route to scoring points. And I think that that's, what sports analytics should be, Thomas, is to contextualize, what's happening in a way that is getting you closer to the truth. And so, whether or not, I sort of think about like, if you're playing if you're always getting your carries on 1st and 10, or you're always passing on early downs and stuff like that, you're going to have a different expectation than if you have to pass on every down. And so this gets us kind of the way there to contextualizing what performance is like and being able to better predict what we're going to see in the future.
Very good. Thank you for taking the time on that. Do you want to talk San Fran head to head with the Giants at all, or do we want to go to the other 2 games as well?
Yeah, I mean, that one's not as, when you look at the Giants, like we talked about, and I just want to get your brief opinion on this, because Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen really have their kind of a similar situation as you did, where they took over a team that had been struggling. They had a good season in year 1. And our biggest worry for them was that expectations would be too high in year 2, right? And, you guys went from 11-5 your first year to 9-7. They're 9-7-1. Who knows what the record will be? But can you give a little bit of an explanation on like what happens when you do great your first year relative to expectations? What does that do to the expectation? And how do you, as a team builder and how do you frame expectations for future years? Because that's where I really see the Giants, where you have a good year, you buy into your quarterback, and now you have a much harder schedule and maybe things regress a little bit. How do you make sure that ownership is still on your team, sort of after that?
That's a good question. I mean, Brian Daboll wins Coach of the Year, right? Year 1. Mike Smith, Coach of the Year, year 1. Where Joe Schoen was, and the expectations of Joe and Brian coming in were like, well, let's see how it all comes together, right? That was very similar to us, in Atlanta when Smitty and I come in, Mike Smith and I come in as neophytes, and we have an owner in Arthur Blank and his people, of course, who had big expectations out the gate. As odd as that sounds, right? What were they? Atlanta was 4 wins coming into that season. We came out, we win, we do some nice things. We come back and we made sure that we were very aware of expectations. Having come from the New England Patriots, and what Bill used to drive into us, keeping the expectations in check was a really difficult thing. I would take the winning any day, right? It allowed us to kick off our time in Atlanta with a lot of confidence. And I take it away from Atlanta over to New York. They came into this season with unbelievable amounts of confidence in my mind. So they start out that game where a lot of people are thinking that, wow, is this team completely overrated? And I don't believe that at all. I think they're just getting their feel. I think they're going to be fine. It was just, they were going against a defense and a defensive coach that I have a great deal of respect for, and Dan Quinn, who just turned it down or turned it up, excuse me, and just started rolling with it. So my point on all of this is keeping expectations in check is important, but that's not Brian Daboll either. He's got like some legit confidence about him, right? He wants his team coming in with the confidence and the competitiveness that we're ready to hit the ground running in year 2. And I don't think just because of their first game or second game, like I don't think that that's going to set the tone for them coming into this year. So I think it's important, of course, and I don't want to ramble about it anymore. The reality is I've been there and I understand that feeling. We ended up not getting to the playoffs in year 2. it'll be really interesting to watch the energy as this team moves in with big contracts, an injury to Saquon. How long is Saquon out, by the way? What were you saying earlier?
Well, I think it was close to playing this week, but with the 10 days off, you just kind of give him a little bit of a rest, and then you play him. I think it's not going to be a long-term injury for him. Luckily, for the Giants.
Starting
to your point, like you guys didn't make the playoffs in year 2. You were the 1 seed in the NFC in year 3. Right. I hope that again, like I've said for a lot of these teams, I hope expectations are reasonable so that some of these team builders can really get an opportunity to test their mettle and not be sold off as quickly, which matters to me, I think. Speaking of, let's get to this other game, because this is a game between two teams, Thomas, that are kind of similar to each other. The Vikings and the Chargers. The Chargers and the Vikings are both 0-2. The betting markets for this game opened the number of points expected in this game at 49.5. It's now 54.5. So the market's looking at both of these defenses and saying, I don't think that they get a stop against anybody. This thing went from the Chargers being a small underdog, I believe, to the Vikings being to the Chargers being a favorite, to now the Chargers being an underdog, kind of flipping through zero. These are two teams that are very similar to each other in that defensively they have some talent kind of on the back end, but that sort of backbone of the defense, the defensive line, interior linebacker core, has really struggled stopping the run. And so I do expect points in this game. The one thing about the Minnesota Vikings is, as we showed in like the post thing last week, they had a first percentile rushing EPA, minus 0.79 expected points added against the Eagles. Kirk Cousins made up for that by being tremendous on late downs. What do we think about this game? I can't wait. I think it's going to be entertaining. But of course, the team that loses this one, Thomas, assuming it doesn't end in a tie, is going to be 0-3 and really behind the 8 ball.
Behind the 8 ball is a tough thing for both of these groups, right? You continued to say all through the offseason, as much as you're a fan of Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, you're saying it's going to be tough for them, right? You were very outspoken given what their situation was there. Start off with the turnovers, of course, which you have not commented on the turnovers. Before we move forward, what is your opinion on the turnovers? Why are the turnovers happening? Are they going to be able to overcome this sort of turnovers? I'm in a little bit of a quandary here when I start thinking about this team, and I think about what the Vikings are, and a team that I think has a lot of talent in the Chargers, and yet your team, the Vikes. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
So I think when you look at having turned the ball over 7 times in 2 weeks, that's got to regress to the mean. It's not good to be that weird with the football. But generally speaking, the interceptions get dropped, fumbles get recovered by you sometimes as opposed to the other team. 4 fumbles lost in the same game, Thomas. It's been more than 15 years since the Vikings had that happen to them. So it's a pretty random thing. And, they've been competitive despite that. I think with them, it's about staying ahead of the sticks. It's about not depending so much on Kirk Cousins, because as good of a thrower as he is, that game got away from them early in the second half because he had a strip sack fumble. Yeah. Christian Darrisaw, their left tackle, a really good football player, ankle injury. His backup, Oli Udoh, is sustained a really bad knee injury. So they were on their 3rd left tackle against that Eagles front. The Chargers bring Khalil Mack. They bring Joey Bosa into the mix. That's not going to be all that great if the Vikings can't protect Cousins. So I think the turnovers regress, but I also think the Vikings' ability to get 3rd down conversions also regress. And so I think that you're going to I'm worried about Minnesota in this game in that regard. Now, when I look over at the other side with the Chargers, like they have some of the exact same issues as far as like not being able to stop the run, not being able to protect their quarterback, not being able to capitalize on a passer who's playing at the top of his game right now. So again, when I look at this game, like the market makes it about a pick 'em. I kind of agree with that.
Do you think, back to the Vikings for a minute, that this sort of 3-way that they have going on here, I've still questioning why the Detroit Lions traded, Hawk. I don't understand why that was. I think that what they're doing here with again, I've always said a solid quarterback with one of the best receivers and a very, very talented tight end. Can a defense like the Chargers, who are supposed to be really good, can they keep up with that group? Like, can they stay in line with that? And I don't, I'm not convinced yet that they can. I'm concerned about it. I'm concerned about their coaching situation, at the Chargers right now, and how he's going to be dealing with an offense like this, to be honest with you.
Yeah, the thing with the Chargers that's interesting, and this gets back to one truth that's really happened. When 2 off seasons ago, when the Chargers signed J.C. Jackson had similar production as Denzel Ward, and yet he made $4 million less APY, and everybody's like, well, what is that? And I think people are putting too much stock in some of the public grades that these defensive backs, because it's very random. But when you look at how J.C. Jackson has performed for the Chargers, you get a much, much bigger appreciation for Bill Belichick and his ability to coach defensive backs, because he was fantastic for the New England Patriots. He's really had a hard time of it for the Chargers. And when you invest that much money, $16 million APY into a corner, you expect him to be better than a guy that's been benched on multiple times for this team. Derwin James is terrific. I think that they'll have an easier time stopping TJ Hawkinson than the Eagles did or the Bucs did with Derwin James. But unless they put bracket coverage, and that's, people have given Kwesi a lot of crap because of his first draft. But you look at his second draft, Jordan Addison, 2 touchdowns in 2 games, a deep threat. I think that the Vikings have a lot of resilience as a passing game because of what they bring to you with Addison as well as KJ Osborne. I don't think the Vikings are really going to have a hard time if they can protect Cousins with the secondary of the Chargers. I think the Chargers are going to struggle in that realm in that part of the game. And I think that's why bettors have really put a lot of faith into that over.
Can I ask you about, do you think it's on the head coach, or do you think it's on the general manager, in Los Angeles? Who's got more heat? And is there heat on Tom Telesco, or is it more on the head coach? Because look, I don't doubt that their talent is at least in my impression, watching last week's game and watching what the Chargers were and how they were moving the ball around. I think they can run it. I think they can pass. And I think they should have a defense that's thriving. Is that on the coach?
Well, I think if you look at the talent the Chargers have, you grade it out, right? Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Quentin Johnston, Gerald Everett's a former second-round pick of the Rams who's been a good football player before. Rashawn Slater's a good tackle. Corey Linsley's a good center. Sebastian Joseph Day has been useful in the past before. Mack and Bosa are really good. Kenneth Murray's a first-round pick. Eric Kendricks is a player that has had success for Minnesota now. He's going to have a revenge game here. And Derwin James is good. Nasir Adderley's a top pick. I have a hard time putting it on Tom Telesco. I think there's talent on that team. And so we've seen Brandon Staley coach above his weight class before. When he coached the Rams defense as a coordinator in 2020, that was a very productive group. Now, that team had a lot of really good players. Ashawn Robinson, holding the point of attack, Aaron Donald, Leonard Floyd. So I'm just wondering, has Brandon Staley lost an edge as far as coaching? Because I have a hard time looking at the Chargers and saying that team isn't built well, or that team doesn't have talent. So if I had to, it's all of the above, I think. But if I had to put it on one, I would say the coaching is maybe doing worse than the general managing is there. I also think, look, they've lost 2 one-score games. They're 0-2. They made the playoffs last year. They lost a one-score game in the playoffs. Maybe some of it's just randomness, and they're losing close games because of coin flips. And maybe Brandon Staley's getting too much flack, and they're in all these games. And every time they play the Chiefs, who's the Super Bowl champion, they're always in those games. But ultimately, at the end of Thomas, if you had a coach who was constantly losing one-score games, you'd ask some questions, right?
You'd ask questions for sure. And that's where I'm going with it. I think Tom has a really good grasp of building teams. Obviously he was raised through the Bill Polian world and Bill's network. He understands what it is about putting talented athletic football teams together. And as much as I'm pretty positive about most people, I just think Staley has a lot on his plate this year. And as they move on through the season, it's going to get hotter and hotter, I can imagine. So that's where my take is on it.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just really excited for this game because I just think it's going to be entertaining. The Chargers-Dolphins game in week 1 was the best game of week 1. The Tennessee game, Tennessee always gets teams in rock fights. So that game with the Chargers wasn't that great, even though it went to overtime. The Chargers always play entertaining games. So I think that one's one to look for, and I'm excited for that. The last game I think we're going to talk about before we let you go, Thomas, is the Jets against the Patriots. Both teams are reeling here a little bit. Obviously, the Jets lost Aaron Rodgers. They went to Dallas. I actually want to bring up one more figure here because I think, what I really like about this, and, shout out to Parker Fleming and Tage Seth for putting these together because, I think that the best analysts make the conclusion easy for the consumer to understand. And if you look at this, there's no more easy conclusion to understand than how poorly the Jets played against the Dallas Cowboys. Your old friend Dan Quinn. When I see all that red on the left-hand side for the Jets, I think of Dan Quinn and how much he had Zach Wilson in a blender the other day. They did hit a big explosive play to Garrett Wilson. That was really their only success story on offense. I look at the Jets. They're 3-point underdogs at home. The look-ahead line for this, Thomas, back when it was Aaron Rodgers starting, were the Jets favored by about 4.5 against New England. So you see the 7-point swing with Aaron Rodgers in this game, without Aaron Rodgers in this game. New England last week against Miami really didn't shut down Miami's offense as much as the score indicated. It was, Miami had a lot of early down success, but Bill Belichick, through special teams wizardry, which is always his thing, as well as late down success against Tua, was able to keep that game close. I actually think the Jets are being undervalued here in this game. I think that their defense is really good. I think that the Patriots, we were looking at their last game where success rate, they're fine. They were in the upper half of the league in terms of getting play for play success against the Dolphins last week, but they just can't get the big plays you need to really win football games. Thomas, tell me the last time the New England Patriots were 0-3.
Was that 2000, I believe, right?
2000, they started 0-5, I think, or 0-7. I can't remember. It was 0 more than 3. And
Can
so
we talk more, though, very quickly? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Where do you think that defense is right now watching it? I was a little intrigued with, again, Duggars, right? Duggars, the little Ryan kid, as well as watching Christian Gonzalez. I know he didn't have the best first game, right? I really like him as a player and where they're going in the secondary. In general, that defense, from a statistical analysis, where are they, by the way? Where do you think they are? And where do you think, can they continue to play well, even if their offense is flailing and even if maybe they're coming up short on the win side? Or do you think
we've seen that? I mean, there have been teams that have had way better defenses and offenses, and it doesn't function very well. Like the locker room doesn't function very well. It doesn't really do a good job. Like it's not great team chemistry, right? So I think I think Mac Jones, though, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, like Mac Jones isn't that impressive, but I think Mac Jones is tough. And if you're going to struggle, like think about Jim McMahon played for a bunch of these teams, right? Like Jim McMahon, won 26 straight starts once. But I remember later in his career, Football Outsider, or not Football Outsiders, Fade the Noise with Aaron Schatz now came out with the best defense of all time as the 91 Eagles. And that team was quarterbacked by Jim McMahon after Randall Cunningham. If you're going to have a split between the offense and defense that's that stark, and we're seeing that a little bit in New England, your quarterback better be a tough son of a bitch, like Jim McMahon was. And I think as bad as the Patriots offense can be at times, I do think Mac Jones is the kind of quarterback where you don't see him, you don't see him keel over, you don't see him wilt. And so even though that offense is hard to watch, I think Mac Jones is at least inspiring enough where I don't think that team's going to go in the tank from a cultural standpoint. Now, if you flip that over to the other side of the ledger here, right, where the Jets have been really talented defensively and Zach Wilson has held them back for a couple of years now. Now, Zach Wilson, I think he's being a good soldier, but he's not, to me, the same kind of toughness guy that a Mac Jones is. So he's going to have to perform better for this team not to fall apart from a cultural standpoint. Do you see that possibly happening in this game? Do you see that possibly happening rest of season? He's got some talent, but he has not put it together so far.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've said this time and again. I mean, to win with a sort of a midline quarterback, it's a tough thing for me to watch game in and game out. I'm really worried about what they're going to be dealing with here. And again, you know my feeling about Joe Douglas. I think the world of him. I think he puts together really good teams. I think he knows what he's doing. But I just don't see. I don't see the the situation that you need from a quarterback who's going to be ultimately gritty and competitive through this really tough time, and necessarily pull them through as you need. I mean, he makes some plays, right? I think he had another long pass in the last game, right? But it was called back on was it a holding call, I believe?
I believe so, yeah.
How he responds to that. I mean, look, I'm looking for someone like just with the fire in their eyes. I just don't see it. And I've never really necessarily seen it. I didn't necessarily see it when he came out. That doesn't mean he can't be a good quarterback. But, look, we had an opportunity to be around people, whether it's Tom Brady or whether it was other quarterbacks or whether it was Matt Ryan, guys who have a little bit of grittiness, who get knocked around and get back up. It always looks like he has seems like he has a look in his eye and something that he's questioning. And that's concerning for me. I know that's a little bit of a loose evaluation, brother, but I'm concerned about it.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's articles out there where I talk about how I really like Zach Wilson. It was, the statistics and everything. Now, 2020 was a weird year where BYU played a lot of cupcakes on that schedule. That one game right after the election in 2020 where they went and played the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers and lost on the road. Like, there's maybe some, I think that Zach Wilson, if he ever becomes good, will be a good quarterback. It sounds like a tautology, but if he ever finds success, I think he'll build on it. I think he's more of a front runner. I think that's like when he found success at BYU, it snowballed and became exponential. In the same vein, when he's had struggles, it's snowballed in the wrong directions. And I don't know if you can be a great quarterback, if that's true about you. I need a guy who's always mean reverting, a guy who is, when it's going bad, is always going to be the steadying force. And when it's going good, is distributing the ball to other people. And I think that that's just not true of Zach Wilson. And I missed that eval because when he was playing great at BYU, we only saw that one side. We only saw it snowball in the right direction. And, I think that's true of a lot of college quarterbacks because by the nature of it, if I'm evaluating a college quarterback for the NFL, that means he had success in college. And I really, sometimes it's, it's illustrative what he does when success is harder to come by.
I mean, Eric, this is a big, big move. I know we've gone beyond the Aaron Rodgers signing and all that, but the fact that they put this first round pick aside and a very, very important first round pick, to me, spoke volumes on what they believed in him. They're trying to keep it positive. I get it. Think about that. Again, think about how that would affect him. Think about how it affect the team. Does it make the team feel like, wow, we made a mistake on this guy or not? I mean, I would be really interested to see how that, inside the locker room, how people feel for him. And again, God bless the kid. I get it. It's tough. It's not easy. You hear Robert talk about it like, this is our guy. Now that we don't have Aaron, this is a guy we're going with. Is that truly the case? How long do you really need to give, Zach, before you decide we need to look again in this upcoming draft or free agency?
Well, look at the goals for the Jets are very clearly to make the playoffs and make hay in the playoffs in the AFC. Yeah. If you can't beat this New England team, you got it, and those are still your goals, and you haven't reoriented your goals. It's time to move on. And I'm going to ask you one last question before we go. Talked about the game in Minnesota a week from now, this week. Is it Kirk Cousins?
Is it Kirk Cousins? What is he?
Kirk Cousins on the last year of his deal.
Yeah.
He's relatively cheap this year. His base salary is only $10 million.
Wow.
You're not giving up a first round pick because Rodgers is not playing 65% of the snaps for you this year. So you can send over that conditional to Minnesota. Minnesota, if they lose this week and go to 0-3, and you're Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, right? You already have 13 wins banked from last year, right? I'm not, this isn't how it actually works. But when you think about that, right? Do you send over Kirk Cousins for a first round pick to the Jets? And because Kirk Cousins could win that team some games, right? That to me is an option that makes a lot of sense for both clubs. If both teams were to lose this week, I think you would at least have to consider sending Cousins over to the Jets. And back like in 2018, Kirk used the Jets as leverage against the Vikings in his deal. Does he turn about fair play on the Jets here?
Does Woody Johnson give that group the opportunity to do such? That's a whole other.
I mean, my thing is, and I know you're not a big gambler, but my thing is like, you're already in Vegas. You've already spent all of your money. There's 3 more days there. You're all out of money. What are you going to do? You're going to sit in your room the rest of the weekend, or you're going to go back to the ATM machine and play some more, right? And the Jets are already in Vegas. There's 15 games left on this schedule. What else are you going to do?
It's a big time projection there, man. Well, I'll let the people feedback on it because, I can't imagine that's where my head would go as a GM of that organization. But again, I think Joe is really good. I think Joe's probably been mulling it over, but not an easy decision. And look, I've said before, I think if that defense can continue to rip it up, well, I think they are a very good defense. You're the one that put them out there even before Dallas as a stud defense in our last conversations.
I think they're in that same class. I think Dallas, though, as I gather data on Dallas, I think Dallas is the best team in the league right now. And I think Dallas's defense is the best defense in the league. Like, that's where I'm at after week 2. I think the Jets are a top 5 defense comfortably. And that's my whole point about Cousins is a guy, for the most part, now I know they've turned it over 7 times, is not a mistake guy, right? The problem with Wilson is not necessarily that he can't make the big plays, it's that he makes too many mistakes. And imagine being a defense where you're only giving up 10 points every game and he gives the other team 7. Like that's kind of where I'm at. So I don't think it happens, but I would at least consider it if I was Douglas.
It's back to morale. That's a tough thing for morale for sure. Yeah. As you just painted it. When a defense is rocking the way they should be rocking and you just can't get it done, it'll be interesting. Again, we're only going into 3 games in. Sometimes I can't believe that I'm being a talking head, not necessarily, but at 3 games in or 2 games in, let alone, I mean, it's going to be to me, obviously, I mean, do you consider what you're talking about after another 2 or 3 games? Or you think Joe should be doing that right now?
I'll give Zach Wilson some games, but not that many.
I got it. That's what I figured.
Well, awesome. This was a lot of fun. We previewed Thursday Night Football. We previewed Vikings Chargers. We previewed New England versus the New York Jets. We're going to let Parker Fleming preview some other stuff tomorrow. I'm also going to come back Friday and talk about what happened on Thursday, as well as look at some of the games this coming weekend. This is a lot of fun. Thank you all for coming to this. If you're here, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, tell a friend about the show so that when we take off as a show, you can say you were there first. You can be smug about that. So for Thomas Dimitroff, for Eric Eager, this has been the Sumer Sports Show.